My name is Aisha Jenkins, and at 46, I reside in Charleston, South Carolina, a serene, history-rich town in the American South. Not long back, everything shifted dramatically for me. It began on the afternoon my husband, Frank to all who knew him, succumbed to a sudden cardiac arrest. The shock hit without warning. Officials from the local hospital reached out to inform me. He'd breathed his last in solitude, shortly after wrapping up one more getaway at the lakeside cabin, that secluded spot he always kept off limits to me. For decades, the property remained an enigma, a forbidden enclave reserved solely for his world. I recall ending the call and just perching there motionless, eyes fixed on the carpet as the words struggled to sink in. Tears didn't come immediately. Instead, a hollow void overshadowed any sharp grief. Frank wasn't the warm, engaging type. He thrived on structure, protocols, and uneasy quiet. Our bond had eroded into a chilly ritual marked by constant voids. I'd grown accustomed to staying silent on inquiries, withholding views, and steering clear of his path. With his passing, I pondered whether my sorrow targeted him or the fragments of my own identity I'd surrendered. Sure, I wept during the service, but beneath it all, sorrow wasn't quite the dominant emotion. It blended bewilderment with an intense sense of liberation. Guilt nagged at me for not crumbling entirely, for lacking deep longing towards someone who'd rendered me unseen for more than 2 decades. Frank exerted tight control. He'd select my outfits, critique my manner of speech, and dictate visits to my siblings. His decisions always prevailed. I existed as a mere prop in the meticulously scripted narrative of his existence. Employment never factored into my life. He insisted it was superfluous, claiming his income sufficed for our needs. Yet that left me without autonomy, influence, or expression. Whenever I suggested an idea, he'd counter with curt retorts, a veiled disdain peeking through his stiff grin. Bit by bit, I diminished, and in confronting his void now, a fresh resonance emerged within, a quietude all my own. Not the oppressive hush he'd imposed, but the one I'd suppressed for so long. For the initial time, it seemed eager to emerge. Frank possessed a retreat by the water's edge in the Low Country, mere miles from Charleston. He'd received it as an inheritance from an uncle long before our paths crossed. Right from the outset, he established it as his personal sanctuary. Weekends invariably drew him there. He explained it as essential downtime, outings for angling with buddies, a domain for fellows alone. "It's not your scene," he'd say offhandedly, like it was utterly commonplace. He extended no invitation my way, not in all our 20-plus years together. Initially, the exclusion stung. Eventually, I resigned to it. I evolved into the spouse who lingered at home, readied his work attire for the week ahead, and probed nothing. Mentioning the cabin prompted diversions. A subtle nudge for a glimpse elicited chuckles. Gradually, it embodied the secrets he withheld. And unwittingly, the catalyst for revelations about my inner self yet to unfold. The day of his death, resolve formed. I'd venture there someday, not in his honor, but to reclaim my own narrative. A week post-interment, I settled in to sort through his belongings. My aim was to empty cabinets, seal old eras, and cleanse our space of echoes from dominance in yesteryears. Amid a clear plastic sleeve, I uncovered the cabin's paperwork, the title, service invoices, upkeep receipts, all under his ownership still, which came as no shock. Gripping that paperwork evoked the tangible weight of my own entrapment. It sparked genuine thoughts of liquidation. I had no desire to retain mementos of those lonesome weekends, the muted suppers on returning Sundays, or the endless pretexts. The cabin carried excessive baggage of hurt. I intended to deliver the files to the lawyer's firm and initiate the divestment promptly. Yet prior to that, an insistent pull urged me to witness it firsthand, not driven by grim intrigue, but a compulsion to secure that threshold personally. Uncertainty loomed over what awaited, but readiness had taken hold. On a crisp Saturday dawn, I set out solo. I filled a knapsack with bottled water, a light bite, a journal, and a weathered key unearthed from the depths of his bureau. Its functionality was a gamble, yet I held it like an overdue summons. The route wound tight through lofty pines in enveloping stillness. Each kilometer amplified the pressure in my torso. Upon reaching the spot, I halted before the corroded metal barrier and silenced the motor. My pulse raced fiercely. No vehicle sat nearby, yet an odd vibe lingered. The postbox brimmed with fresh mail. Lawns appeared newly tended, and tire tracks suggested regular traffic on the approach. I advanced cautiously, key gripped firmly, inhaling deeply. Uncertainty swirled. Unlock the entrance or rap on the dwelling. I hesitated at the entrance, unsure if I even belonged there. Yet an inner urge compelled me to proceed. The property wasn't Frank's domain anymore. It had become a territory I could finally enter, and I resolved to pass through that doorway. As soon as I crossed the front threshold, I halted abruptly. Garments dangled from the rear porch railing. A container of playthings sat beside the hearth, and the aroma of prepared meals lingered in the atmosphere. This residence showed no signs of neglect or closure for several days. Far from it. Instead, it exuded a vibrant, occupied dwelling with its established daily flow. The surfaces gleamed spotless. On the eating table rested a bouquet of blooming blossoms, and a little bike leaned against the pane near the sill. Every detail left me profoundly disoriented. My initial suspicion was that intruders had forced their way in and claimed it, though that idea seemed illogical. Nothing indicated intrusion or disorder. Rather, it revealed meticulous care, subtle touches, and signs of vitality. I remained rooted in place, too wary to advance. That's when sounds of steps echoed from the corridor, accompanied by a gentle female tone summoning someone casually. Frank. Paralysis gripped me. I couldn't budge or utter a sound. That call wasn't directed at me. In an instant, it dawned on me that this dwelling concealed more than mysteries. It housed residents. I rapped lightly on the panel, despite my pulse thundering like it might erupt from my ribcage. Barely 5 seconds elapsed before the entrance creaked open gradually, revealing a youthful lady around 28, with a noticeably rounded abdomen signaling a late-stage pregnancy. Surprise and wariness flickered across her features, as though she couldn't fathom my arrival. Her gaze swept over my visage, attire, and palms, searching for any clue. Prior to any word from her, she inquired hesitantly, "Who might you be?" Right then, it hit me that my appearance would disrupt everything. I stated my name, then appended steadily yet composedly, "I'm Frank's spouse." Her eyes widened dramatically, and her countenance shifted utterly. She retreated a pace and swung the door broader, eyes locked on mine. Without a syllable, she motioned me inside and moved out of the way. The home's inside felt even more inviting than its exterior suggested. It radiated coziness, closeness, and habit, yet I navigated it as an outsider. I lowered myself onto the couch as she positioned herself in an armchair opposite, evidently dazed. The lady who presented as Simone Hayes kept fixating on me with blended bewilderment and anguish. Her fingers quivered faintly as she placed them over her midsection, like drawing comfort from an impending reality she dreaded. Upon my verification that Frank had passed away just 7 days prior, she clamped a hand over her lips, and moisture gathered in her eyes. She explained she assumed he was on an out-of-town work excursion, due back tomorrow. No updates had reached her. Nothing had been communicated. To her, he remained among the living. Quiet sobs overtook her as she gazed unblinkingly at the ground. I extended a Kleenex from my bag, and following moments of mutual quietude, she began to open up. She admitted their liaison had lasted nearly 4 years. He'd assured her of his bachelor status, citing frequent professional journeys that limited him to weekend stays. He'd supported her, and instilled a sense of security. I absorbed it all wordlessly, without response. Each phrase she uttered landed like a sharp strike, unveiling a concurrent existence, a different partner, a separate household. And I, the unseen partner, struggled for words. I refrained from confronting or faulting her, for her suffering was genuine, untainted, mirroring my own precisely. She'd been misled, too, sensed the treachery, and lay devastated. Meeting my stare, she whispered, nearly timidly, "I had no idea he was wed. I wouldn't have permitted it." I credited her sincerity. No deception colored her tone, just raw sorrow. Rising awkwardly, she approached a cabinet in the passage and came back bearing a carton brimming with images. She passed it to me mutely. Within lay snapshots of them seaside, dining out, and right here in the lounge, wrapped in each other's arms, beaming like an authentic pair. There were also greeting cards for occasions inscribed by him, personal scribbles, and modest presents. Together, they formed a narrative utterly foreign to me. A tightness swelled in my esophagus, though tears stayed at bay. Overwhelm silenced any outburst. Undeniably, this encounter would divide my existence into eras, since every belief I'd held proved false. Simone recounted encountering Frank at a city center cafe during her stint as a server. He'd entered on a drizzly day seeking a brew. She described him as gracious, unable to tear his eyes away, and how repeated stops led to subtle courtship. In her view, he possessed allure, politeness, a softness even. He discussed his role as a vendor, endless voyages, and the challenges of romance amid such a schedule. Marriage went unmentioned. No hint of another existence in the urban area surfaced. As Simone continued, I sensed a piece of me shattered quietly inside. Each revelation, every deception Frank had spun so effortlessly, hit like an unseen blow. She revealed that their encounters started just occasional weekends at first, but gradually he suggested turning it official. Together, they picked out furnishings, freshened up the walls with paint, and dreamed aloud about starting a family. He vowed her a tomorrow filled with security, kinship, a steady life, and she trusted him, much like I had back then. The identical assurances, the mirrored optimism. 2 lives tangled in one prolonged falsehood. Simone retrieved a little container from the shelf and presented it to me with gentle care. Nestled within lay tiny infant socks, a baby toy that jingled, and a pale garment dotted with celestial patterns. She explained they'd selected them jointly only 7 days prior, from a shop in the city center. He brimmed with enthusiasm. He chatted about the child as though nothing else mattered in his world. He'd sworn to claim the newborn on official records, scout for more spacious living space, and even brought up tying the knot. It rang so dependable, so meticulously mapped out, sending shivers down my spine. He'd woven the exact same tapestry with me once. Gazing at her, I caught echoes of my own history staring back. Expectant, brimming with promise, oblivious to how the man who dangled the stars was secretly forging torment in the shadows. Simone was fractured, though the depth of it hadn't fully dawned on her yet. She still had to grasp that her narrative was fabricated too, that he merely replayed the identical routine across various partners. I held my tongue. I merely sealed my mouth tight, fixed my eyes on the ground, and forced down the lump in my throat, since beneath it all, guilt gnawed at me too, for never sensing the truth, for staying mute all those years, for not walking away sooner. Simone powered up her mobile and displayed Frank's latest text to me. They overflowed with warmth and endearment, debating potential names for the little one and sketching out ideas for his return from that work excursion. The final message dated back just 3 days prior to his passing. "Missing you too," it said, paired with a love symbol. She unraveled then, sobs escaping as she voiced it out loud, clinging to some faint wish for clarity, for resolution, for anything to stitch together the chaos that had just erupted before her. I allowed her tears to flow unchecked. No solace existed in me to give. Next, she unveiled scribbled memos, cinema stubs, a modest scrapbook brimming with snapshots of their duo. All that Frank had insisted didn't exist for me in latter days. He'd nurtured afresh with her. I even uncovered a half-finished note where he professed that existence only clicked into place after crossing paths with her. Fury and hollowness twisted within me. I wavered between weeping and howling, yet neither surfaced. I simply perched there, eyeing the fragments of his hidden saga as my core gradually dissolved. I stayed wordless as Simone sobbed before me, gripping that device like a lifeline to summon him anew. Consolation eluded me for her. I'd endured my own sleepless vigils shedding tears over him, though for wholly separate wounds. The deepest sting for me wasn't the infidelity itself, but the decades spent beside a stranger who concealed his true self from me entirely. It seemed my existence had been an elaborate illusion, where I merely performed the part he'd scripted. And now, the curtain revealed I wasn't the sole performer in his drama. We stood as two souls hoodwinked by the identical protagonist. Not one drop fell from my eyes right then. Void claimed me, as if no fragile remnants lingered within to fracture further. I'd wept so profusely in hushed agony through the union that only calloused resolve endured. Listening to Simone softly relive her recollections ripped through me, for so many phrases echoed ones I'd known. I'd absorbed them myself, ages past, delivered in that very cadence. It mirrored my yesteryears in her today, twin tales etched in the pigment of treachery. Once her composure returned at last, she met my gaze with eyes still glistening and murmured, "I had no idea he was wed. I promise, had I realized, I'd never have gotten involved." Her tone quivered, yet her expression held no remorse, only stunned incredulity. She too emerged as an unwitting casualty, viewed from another vantage. She extended regrets to me, as if her unawareness equated to disloyalty. I inclined my head without a sound. Absolution wasn't required. Blame evaded us both. Solely Frank had spun this tangled snare. Simone echoed the sentiment endlessly. I had no clue. I had no clue. An urge to embrace her stirred in me, despite the swirl of conflicting sentiments still dividing us. Resentment toward her? None. Truth be told, I comprehended her more deeply than I'd care to own. Our overlaps ran deeper than any prior fancy. We'd each adored the selfsame individual, convinced he belonged solely to us. Blind to how his fabrications bridged our worlds, a sharp, yet oddly freeing ache washed over me, for at long last, solitude fled my suffering. We lingered in dialogue for hours, voices soft and unhurried, granting space for utterances to emerge unbidden. We absorbed one another's tales as though destiny had linked us long before awareness dawned. No blame sought its way between us, merely fragments of honesty to mend the voids anew the betrayal. Simone opened up to me about her anxieties, about feeling utterly lost now that her world had crumbled. I shared my own decades of quiet endurance, the sense that I'd never really embraced life fully. Our talk was tough, yet essential. As I rose to go, she accompanied me to the exit. We stood there, exchanging silent glances for a moment, and then, spontaneously, we embraced. It felt clumsy and fleeting, but genuine all the same. Two women shattered by the same deceitful man, drawing solace from their mutual revelation. I drove off with a heavy heart and my mind swirling with reflections. Uncertainty loomed about my next steps, but one thing rang true. I refused to carry the burdens of an imposed existence any longer. The moment had come to author my own path, On the way home, Simone lingered in my thoughts, her pained expression, her vulnerable frame shielding the offspring of a man who'd lied to us both. She faced solitude, expecting a child short on means, with no kin close by. My knowledge of her was limited, but a deep stir moved within me. I couldn't simply look the other way and act as if she weren't real. Frank had orchestrated this mess, not her. Despite the ache it caused, I recognized a moral duty, not toward him, but to her and the baby. Sleep evaded me that evening. I rose repeatedly, staring at the shadows overhead, and rifled through forgotten storage, seeking any solace. None appeared. Instead, a fresh resolve emerged. I wouldn't stand by passively as another suffered the fallout from a falsehood she hadn't started. In aiding her, I sensed I was also aiding my own recovery. Not as a jilted spouse, but as an liberated individual, choosing boldly for the first time without dread or approval. At last, I was tuning into my inner voice. That next weekend, I gathered items, infant outfits saved from my niece, staple foodstuffs, and a few volumes I figured might appeal to her. I had no clue if Simone would welcome me or grasp my intent, but an inner drive urged me back. I needed her to see she wasn't isolated, that not every connection in her world need end in desertion. Pulling up to the lakeside cabin, I exited the vehicle deliberately and rapped on the entrance, bracing for the unknown. She hesitated before answering. Spotting me, her gaze expanded in astonishment, as though my presence defied belief. I offered a steady smile and displayed the packages. Words weren't necessary from me, nor her. Our eyes met quietly until she moved to allow entry. She greeted me amid bewilderment and appreciation. The place showed signs of tidying since my prior visit, though her eyes still held that bewildered quality. I placed the items on the counter and assured her no choices were required right then. I'd simply come to offer company, and so I did. Over the meal, dialogue was sparse, but the air felt warmer, less strained. Curiosity led her to inquire about my background, my wedded years, and I responded plainly, without adornment. I described mastering the art of silence to dodge disputes, how isolation had shadowed me endlessly. Simone absorbed it all with the profound quietude born of shared suffering. I ventured to ask if she'd pondered her plans post-delivery. She averted her eyes, denied it with a headshake, admitting she lacked the vigor to plan so far out. That's when I suggested assisting with a modest flat in Charleston, close to where I lived. I emphasized it carried no strings, no reciprocity expected, driven solely by my empathy for her terror and disorientation. Initially speechless, she fixed me with rounded eyes like I was using unfamiliar words. Softly, she whispered, "What makes you want to help me like this?" I answered truthfully, "You're innocent in this. I've stood in your shoes. And back then, no one extended a hand when I craved it most." 7 days on, I secured a compact yet inviting one-room unit in a serene Charleston enclave. No extravagance, but fully equipped. Sunlit space, efficient cooking area, straightforward facilities. I outfitted it minimally, prioritizing ease for Simone and the infant. Translucent drapes, a plush mat, and in the sleeping area, a cradle stocked with disposables, covers, and a plush toy evoking optimism. Phoning to announce its preparedness, she paused wordlessly for moments. Then, voice trembling, she murmured, "I can't find words to express my thanks." I aided her relocation using my vehicle. Brief distance, yet brimming with feeling. She gazed outward mutely, gripping a satchel like her sole possession. Entering the unit, she explored silently. Minutes passed before she faced me, eyes brimming, and pulled me into an embrace. It was a genuine embrace, the kind that spoke for itself without words. In that moment, it hit me that we'd stumbled into something fresh, unplanned, a real connection, not some obligatory tie, but a sincere alliance forged between two scarred souls who'd chosen to speak up at last. The initial wave of venom didn't take long to surface. Brenda, Frank's sister, rang me up one afternoon purely to express her disgust. "You're tarnishing your husband's legacy," she spat out in an icy tone, treating me like some kind of betrayer. She ranted on about loyalty, gossip from the neighbors, the sheer indecency of bonding with the other woman. None of it caught me off guard. Brenda had always prioritized facades over reality. I fired back with a curt, "Handle it however you must," and ended the call free of any remorse. This time around, I refused to defend my choices. For so long, I'd zip my lips to keep the harmony, dodge awkwardness, spare everyone the hassle. But I'd come to see that my quiet had only eroded me from within. No need to rationalize my path to folks who'd never grasped the depths of my experiences. Simone wasn't my foe, my competitor, or some cosmic payback. She stemmed from a deception I'd unwittingly shared in. Supporting her wasn't an act of defiance. It was my stand against repeating the past. If that ruffled feathers, well, others could adapt, much like I'd adapted to their constant scrutiny. Once I'd helped Simone get established, I resolved to offload the lake house for good. I had zero desire to step inside it ever again. That spot brimmed with hidden truths, deceptions, and unspoken weights that pressed too hard. It held no emotional claim on me anymore, regardless of what the paperwork claimed. I reached out to an agent, surrendered the keys, and inked the papers without a backward glance. It felt like sealing shut a portal to years of unnoticed agony. And with that seal, real relief washed over me, like air finally reaching my lungs. I held off sharing the news with Simone until the deal closed. I didn't want her imagining it was all for her sake or tied to the revelations. This move was mine alone. I had to shed that load. When I finally shared it, she met my eyes quietly and murmured, "You've shown more courage than you realize." Words escaped me, but they lingered, echoing deep. After ages, I sensed no longing or bitterness, only an odd serenity, as though I'd reclaimed a fragment of myself I'd assumed was gone forever. Bit by bit, Simone and I wove a relationship that transcended the mess that linked us. We weren't in constant touch, but we showed up for one another in the toughest spots. I joined her for multiple scans, sorted through her health coverage forms, and tagged along to collect a bassinet from a kind neighbor. She never demanded aid, yet she received it with that blend of thanks and unease I recognized all too well. Witnessing her youth clashing with such fragility stung, not from sympathy, but shared understanding. I'd built tougher armor over the decades. She hadn't yet. One afternoon, I spotted her in tears at her doorway, overwhelmed by the heft of her shopping haul. Without a second thought, I snatched her keys, hauled it all upstairs, and kept silent. That quiet act pried open a fissure between us. From there, our dynamic shifted from sporadic support to genuine solidarity. She'd confide her anxieties, and I'd get them instinctively, no elaboration required. We fell into easy chats, stripped of pretense, as if fate hadn't just bound us in suffering, but offered a shot at renewal. When labor hit, she dialed me at 6 a.m., contractions steady and no one else to call. I threw on clothes, seized the prepped go bag from weeks back, and rushed her to the medical center, palms chilled by anxiety. I remained at her side through the ordeal, matching her breaths, clasping her grip, and soothing her as terror surged. I saw her shatter under the agony, only to rally with resilience. At last, when the infant arrived, an unforeseen warmth bloomed in me, as if he belonged to my world too. Simone wept with joy, and I pulled her close, my chest tight with feeling. The little one was stunning, serene, eyes alert like he grasped the whole scene. She urged me to cradle him, and in that hold, a knot inside unraveled. He wasn't blood kin, but this child marked a fresh start, untainted. He embodied closure on the falsehood and the dawn of an alternate path. Right then, Frank's hold on me dissolved. His true inheritance wasn't the wreckage, it was the existence I'd nurtured into being. Weeks on, I dove into counseling. Not because I saw myself as broken, but to unpack why I'd tolerated so much for so long. Every meeting peeled back another locked compartment in my core. I exposed scars I'd accepted as normal, concessions I'd masked as wisdom, and hushings I'd wrongly viewed. It wasn't simple confronting everything, but I knew deep down that I needed to if I truly aimed to reconstruct who I was. For the very first time, returning to my old self held no appeal. I yearned to exist as my authentic self, free from facades, terror, or remorse. I started jotting down in a journal thoughts I'd never voiced before. Memories I'd buried resurfaced, along with piercing glances and phrases that still burdened my spirit. Some evenings brought tears, yet they stemmed not from sorrow, but from liberation. The process of mending stung, but in a purifying way, untainted by shame. The hold of history loosened its grip on me. I was figuring out how to release it, not erase it entirely, but stop letting it shape my identity. Eventually, my counselor suggested joining a women's circle that gathered weekly on Thursday afternoons at the local community hub. I wavered about attending. It seemed mismatched for someone like me. Still, intrigue won out, and I stepped into a space brimming with females from every walk of life, each carrying an inner fracture. We exchanged tales, quiet moments, sobs, and above all, empathy. Judgment stayed absent, interruptions non-existent, and rivalry over suffering unheard of. After ages, a true sense of inclusion washed over me. I spoke haltingly at first, in brief phrases, weighing each syllable carefully. Initially, I worried my experiences would baffle them. Yet quickly, I realized several had endured comparable or even graver ordeals. My reactions weren't madness, exaggeration, or frailty. I was merely a survivor navigating the best way possible in a setting that stifled growth. Those gatherings turned into my refuge. I'd emerge feeling unburdened, more resilient, and sharper in my resolve. Gradually, I set about reshaping my life on solid ground: honesty. Following one such session, I settled on a park bench with a takeaway coffee in hand. Exhausted yet serene, I savored the quiet. That's when Thomas Miller, possessing a steady tone and tranquil ease, who was also departing the venue, came over. He inquired if he might join me, and we conversed lightly on topics like the climate, literature, and the challenges of fresh starts. He shared that he'd lost his spouse 3 years prior, was in counseling himself, and often battled insomnia. No romantic undertones colored the exchange, just genuine presence. Over subsequent weeks, our paths crossed repeatedly at that bench. On occasion, we'd converse. Other times, we'd simply coexist in stillness. He never sought my contact details, offered vows, or pushed boundaries. His composed nature gradually eased my defenses. I wasn't seeking companionship, but I hadn't sealed off possibilities either. In his company, no explanations or defenses felt required. He absorbed my words with courtesy, refraining from repairs or critiques of my history. To me, that embodied solid affection, the sort that lightens, rather than loads. Through Tom, I grasped that genuine connection needn't inflict pain, that a soft gesture outshines countless hollow assurances, and that consistent courtesy surpasses flashy oaths. He avoided any role as rescuer, substitute for absences, or intruder in forbidden territory. Instead, he lingered with forbearance, warmth, and an undemanding essence. He bolstered me amid uncertainties and gently urged faith without demands. Bit by bit, I chose to invite him into my realm, not from desperation, but willingly. No sparks or dramatic flourishes marked us, but glances conveyed volumes. Mutual brews and quiet strolls through greenery. Ours was a bond that arrived not to patch voids, but to journey beside. At last, I faced another without dread of dissolution. Therapy remained a staple. Self-construction persisted. But now, Tom walked with me, affirming that history doesn't dictate my worth and that serenity can follow turmoil, a peace that soothes without dulling, that holds tenderly. That felt entirely novel. When Tom broached matrimony, it came sans kneeling or scripted lines. Just an ordinary day as we cleared foliage from the lawn. With warm eyes, he said, "We could turn this into something lasting, if that's what you wish." My reply didn't rush. A quiet smile sufficed, for my heart already sensed it. We planned a modest rite in a compact garden, encircled by a select few, yet each vital. No blaring tunes or lavish attire, just sincerity, pale blooms, and a hushed vow to nurture without wounding. Simone and her boy occupied the foremost seats, woven into my evolving narrative. Seeing her cradle the infant stirred a profound completion. This child, once rooted in deception, now thrived amid care, honor, and true attendance. At the rite's close, Tom clasped Simone's hand, expressing gratitude for her presence. I observed wordlessly, touched, reminded that not every man mirrored Frank. That union marked no enchanted close. It heralded an aware dawn, ghost-free, unmasked. Love didn't. It didn't mend my scars, but it kept me from facing the hurt in isolation, and that felt like more than I could have hoped for. Over the years, we welcomed 2 additional kids, a spirited daughter and a gentle, perceptive son. Seeing them thrive in a home where affection flowed freely, unbound by dread, stands as my proudest achievement. I never chased flawlessness. I just yearned for serenity, equilibrium, and honesty. Simone stayed woven into our world. She settled only blocks from us, and we'd cross paths regularly. Our little ones romped together, forming ties akin to siblings despite different last names, connections deeper than family ties by birth. The perpetual worry of having to appease or defend my choices had faded from my days. I'd mastered the art of deciding without dread. Occasionally, as I watched them dash through the house or burst into giggles in the garden, I'd reflect on the price I'd paid to reach this point. The path wasn't smooth, swift, or free of agony, yet it belonged to me. Each stride, even the awkward falters, pulled me from an existence forced upon me toward one I'd claim for myself. Gone was the version of me who hushed her voice to dodge conflict. In her place stood a mom, a companion, a confidant, the architect of her narrative. Scars lingered, sure, but I no longer hid them in shame. They traced the terrain of all I'd endured. On still evenings, my thoughts drift to Frank, not laced with resentment or longing, but viewed through a detached calm that brings no sting. He shaped part of my history, indeed, but he no longer owns it. He deceived me. He deceived our family, and he scattered a wake of suffering that lingered for ages to fade. Still, unwittingly, he propelled me into a liberty I couldn't have dreamed of. Absolving him wasn't about excusing his actions. It was about releasing the baggage I refused to haul any longer. That became my escape from his lingering gloom, stepping into my own radiance. These days, I grasp what it means to exist unburdened by terror, unmasked, unbound by the urge to squeeze into another's expectations. My home carries the aroma of warm loaves straight from the oven, scattered volumes, and genuine chuckles. I require no extravagance to feel complete. Tranquility suffices. I've quit seeking validation in others' gazes, having finally seen and accepted the reflection staring back. This is who I am. Aisha, once unseen for so long, now glowing on her own terms. If there's one lesson from this odyssey, it's that life holds true value. Despite the initial sting, the steep toll, the necessity to rebuild from nothing. Enjoyed hearing my tale? From which spot are you tuning in? Drop by in the comments to chat. If the narrative resonated, show your backing with a super thanks. It helps me share more tales like this. Grateful beyond words for your kind encouragement. eager to read your thoughts below. Check out the 2 fresh personal accounts popping up on screen. I swear they're worth your time. Plenty more awaits on my channel. Hit subscribe so you don't miss out. Catch you for the upcoming story. With warmth and admiration,